Some places whisper their secrets like a lullaby. Others scream them, desperate to be heard. But in Pennsylvania, the land does something stranger. It buries its past in plain sight. It wears history like armor when it wants to impress, and hides it like a scar when it is too painful to face. Beneath the forests, behind the stone walls, along the ghost rails that cut across the state, stories still breathe. They move in the dark. They wait for someone bold or reckless enough to listen. Tonight, we are not just telling ghost stories. We are walking into them. 6 doors. 6 places never meant to be opened again. Each one holds a history written in whispers and shadows. And once you hear them, you can't close your ears. You can't unknow. You can't escape the weight of knowing. Think of the places you pass every day without a second thought. An overgrown road swallowed by weeds. A cracked tunnel dripping with moss. A tavern glowing warm against the cold mountain night. Harmless, ordinary, until you learn what still lingers there. A vanished town where the dead are visited by invisible hands. A tunnel that answers your footsteps with screams. A tavern where the floorboards hold secrets buried beneath centuries of blood and rebellion. A mist that bends time and direction until you forget who you are. A phantom train that rides a track that no longer exists. Bells that toll beneath a river, warning the living with voices drowned long ago. This is not about folklore written in dusty books. These are places you can still find on a map. Or maybe, if you dare, under your own feet. They are reminders that history does not end just because we stop writing it down. Some tragedies echo forever. Some betrayals never release their grip. And some questions are dangerous simply because they might answer back. So lock your doors, put on your headphones, and whatever you do, do not look behind you, because after tonight, you will never see Pennsylvania the same way again. The vanishing village of Alvara is not marked on any map you will find today. If you pass through Union County and glance toward the woods, you might not even notice it. Just a cracked stretch of asphalt disappearing into roots, a road overtaken by silence. But if you step forward, you are stepping into a place that was stolen, a place that refuses to die quietly. Alvara began humbly in the 1800s, founded by Quaker settlers who carved out a life in central Pennsylvania's rolling farmland. It was not much by today's measure, just a schoolhouse, a church, a general store, and a handful of homes where generations lived, worked, and were buried. By the early 1940s, around 100 people still called it home. They believed it would always be theirs. And then the war came. In 1942, the U.S. government arrived with a promise disguised as a demand. Eminent domain, they called it. The entire village was seized. The people told their land was needed for a munitions factory, the Susquehanna Ordnance Depot. Families were given weeks to abandon everything. They were told this was temporary, that after the war, Alvara would be theirs again. But history remembers broken promises more than kept ones. The bulldozers came, homes were razed, fields flattened, trees cut, headstones dug up and moved, at least. That is what the government claimed. In their place rose nearly 200 massive bunkers, thick concrete shells built to cradle explosives. When the war ended, the people of Alvara waited for their homecoming. It never came. The factory was decommissioned, the property locked away, and Alvara erased, not just from the land, but from records, too. Whole families disappeared from documents as if they had been swallowed by the earth. Today, the land remains under government control, marked blandly on paper as unincorporated. But if you wander the woods, you will see pieces of the past stubbornly clinging on. Narrow roads strangled by moss, bunker doors rusting in silence, and the faint outlines of foundations half swallowed by dirt. And at the center of it all, something stranger, the cemetery. It should not exist, not after everything else was wiped away. Yet rows of weather-worn gravestones remain, some carved as far back as the 1800s. Stranger still, they are not abandoned. Tulips bloom in the spring, lilies in the summer, chrysanthemums in autumn, fresh flowers, carefully arranged, always recent. But no one knows who leaves them. No descendants are officially listed, no family nearby, no cameras have ever caught a visitor, and yet the graves are never neglected. Hikers who stumble upon this place tell stories that chill the air itself. They speak of footsteps pacing the road, but never matching their own. Of a silence so complete, It feels pressed against the ears. Of shadows standing just beyond the trees, still, waiting until you try to look at them directly. One photographer swore she heard her name whispered, clear and intimate, though she was alone with no signal and no way for anyone else to find her there. Researchers have confirmed the war story, the land seizure, the lie of temporary evacuation, but what they cannot explain is the absence the way entire families seem to vanish from every record after Alvara was taken. As if being stripped of their homes also stripped them of their place in history. Some whispered that the residents did return, but not in flesh, that they were drawn back to the place where their homes once stood, where their loved ones were buried, bound not by choice but by injustice. The bunkers, some say, still hum at night. Pale faces flicker in the dark behind sealed doors. And though the government insists there is no power in those structures, more than one report describes a faint glow leaking from beneath a rusted door, followed by the impossible warmth of concrete in the dead of night. Alvara is not just an abandoned town. It is a wound, cut deep, and never allowed to heal. And wounds, when left untended, fester. They wait. Some towns fade into history. Others refuse to be forgotten, holding on even when there is no one left alive to stay. It does not look like much at first glance. Just a damp stone tunnel tucked beneath an abandoned railway bed in York County, moss dripping down its sides. The air cool and heavy with time, but for locals, the place is more than a shortcut or relic. They call it cursed. They call it trouble. Teenagers dare each other to go inside. Ghost hunters come armed with recorders and cameras. And everyone, no matter what they believe, agrees on one thing. You do not walk into the screaming tunnel lightly. The legend begins with a match. It sounds almost childish, like a prank meant to scare newcomers, but for over a century, the ritual has remained the same. Step to the center of the tunnel. Strike a wooden match. Hold it steady, and wait. If the flame dies on its own, snuffed by something unseen, you won't have long, because then, they say, you will hear her. The scream does not echo like a human voice should. It tears through the stone as though the tunnel itself is remembering something awful. It is high, piercing, sudden, and then it vanishes, leaving behind a silence so deep it swallows every breath. Survivors say the silence is worse than the scream, because it feels alive, like it is pressing against you, waiting for you to speak so it can answer back. The name that haunts this legend is Annabelle. No one knows her story with certainty, but every version ends in fire. Some say she was just a girl, no older than 12, who wandered into the tunnel with her dress catching flame. Others whisper darker possibilities. A father's fury, a secret covered up by the town, even whispers of ritual. Her body, they claim, was found inside the tunnel, burned, twisted, unrecognizable, but no records survive, no obituary, no cemetery stone, just a name passed, like a warning from generation to generation. That has not stopped people from trying to prove it. Paranormal teams have camped in the tunnel, armed with EVP recorders, thermal scanners, and cameras. They have captured fragments that chill the blood. A faint child's voice repeating one word over and over, cold. The sound of footsteps circling the tunnel's center, even though no one was inside. Flashlights flickering violently before dying altogether, as if the dark itself was feeding on the batteries. Some investigators left with scratches across their arms. Others reported a feeling of being watched, not from in front, not from behind, but from above, as though something clung to the ceiling, unseen but waiting. The locals tell stories that spread like wildfire. A couple from Red Lion swore their car stalled right outside the tunnel. The husband popped the hood while the wife stayed inside. Moments later, a scream so sharp split the night that the passenger window beside her shattered inward. No rock, no bullet, no impact, just the scream. When police arrived, the car started up without a problem. Then there was the firefighter who told of finding a raccoon, blackened and twisted in the tunnel center. Its body burned, though the walls were wet and cold. No fire anywhere nearby. He said it looked as though the animal had been cooked from the inside out. Skeptics shrug it off. They say it is just a story, a scare for children, a legend to attract thrill seekers. But legends do not shatter glass. Legends do not call you by name in the dark. And legends do not leave scars on the skin of those who dared too long. Some believe Annabelle's spirit remains trapped in the tunnel, forever screaming for help. Others whisper of something older, something not human that uses the story as bait, feeding on the ritual, growing stronger with every visitor who dares to light that match. But the scariest part is not the scream itself, it is the silence that follows. Because silence is not empty here. It waits, deep and patient. And the more you listen, the more you realize it is not waiting for Annabelle, it is waiting for you. At the edge of the Allegheny Mountains, where the roads bend like serpents and fog clings low to the ground, stands a building that looks almost welcoming. Its stone walls are warm with lantern light, its wide porch sagging but sturdy, the kind of place where a weary traveler might stop for stew and ale, maybe even a room for the night. But looks deceive. For more than 2 centuries, the Jean Bonet Tavern has offered shelter and collected secrets. Some say the building does not just hold history, it remembers it. Built in 1760, long before the Revolution, the tavern began as a trading post before becoming an inn. In its time, it has been everything. A lodge for soldiers, a private residence, a headquarters during the Whiskey Rebellion. Men marched from its doors to war. Deals were struck in its shadow. Lives ended within its walls. If wood could bleed, these beams would be red. And those stains do not wash out. The hauntings began quietly, with whispers that had no mouths. Voices drifting through upper floors after midnight, faint, as though conversations from centuries past had never stopped. At first, the staff blamed each other for the strange happenings. Lamps relit after being snuffed, chairs moved overnight, doors found ajar after being locked. But excuses fell apart the night they saw him. He appears without sound, a tall man in colonial dress, tricorn hat angled low. Sometimes he stands in the hallway, near room 3, sometimes in the dining room, always silent, always watching. Guests have reported catching him in mirrors, his gaze fixed, his eyes unblinking. He walks through closed doors, fading as though the air itself swallows him. But the worst part is his stare. He never looks away, even as he vanishes. Those who've slept here often do not last till morning. Guests have woken to the sensation of fingers brushing their hair, a hand tightening around their ankle. One couple fled at 3 in the morning after feeling something climb into bed beside them, invisible but heavy enough to leave a clear indentation in the mattress. They swore they heard breathing that was not their own. And then there is the basement. In 1957, construction workers tearing up the stone floor unearthed what should never have been buried there, a shallow grave. Human bones, stacked together without care, unnamed, unclaimed, unrecorded. Officials offered no answers. The tavern simply carried on. But after that discovery, the hauntings grew louder, darker. Cold spots appeared even in July. The sharp smell of gunpowder burned through empty rooms. A growl, low and guttural, has been heard echoing beneath the floor. One bartender swears he locked the tavern alone one night. He turned the key in the door, turned back, and in those few seconds, every chair in the dining room had flipped upside down. No sound, no movement, just the impossible aftermath. He walked out without picking up a single one. Historians argue about who the bones belonged to. Some say early outlaws executed and hidden in secret. Others believe they were victims of highway robberies. Travelers silenced forever beneath the inn. Paranormal investigators claim the energy shifts from room to room, as though unseen eyes track your every step. A psychic once described the tavern as a waiting room of spirits, all caught in the loop of their final night, replaying it endlessly. The current owners lean into the legend with ghost tours and tales by firelight, but behind the marketing lies unease. Staff refuse to linger alone after dark. The attic remains locked, and no employee, no matter how seasoned, will step into the basement at night. They say something down there does not like being disturbed. Something buried does not want to stay buried. Travelers check in here for a warm meal and a night's rest, but some guests never check out. Not really. And if you listen closely, when the tavern goes still, you might hear the whispers of those who never left. There is a stretch of forest in Hellam Township that refuses to play by the rules of nature. Compasses spin aimlessly. Fog rolls in on days when the sky is sharp and clear. Trails that should lead out only seem to wind back inward, as though the woods are folding in on themselves. The locals call it by a name they avoid after dark, the Seven Gates. Most people just call it cursed. The legend says there was once a psychiatric hospital hidden deep in these trees, unmarked and unregistered, a place where society locked away the violent and the broken. One night, the asylum burned. Inmates fled screaming into the woods. To trap them, authorities supposedly erected 7 massive iron gates, each deeper than the last. Some patients were caught, others were never seen again, and the gates, those rusting sentinels of iron, still stand. At least one of them does, crooked among the vines, the rest invisible, as though waiting for the right eyes to see them. But the gates are not the only thing that haunts these woods. Travelers who dare to step inside tell of a black mist, thick as oil, moving like it has a mind of its own. It creeps without warning, rolling low and swallowing sound until even your own footsteps fade. Some describe it as walking through silence so heavy it crushes thought itself. Others say the mist carries figures, shapes that stand motionless until you blink, and then they are standing closer, blocking your way. One man who entered swore he saw a figure ahead, barely outlined in the haze. When he turned to flee, the same figure stood in front of him, closer than before. He never found his way out. 36 hours later, a search party discovered him barefoot, miles from where he had entered, confused, dehydrated, unable to explain the missing time. Not everyone is found. In 1999, a group of college students tried to prove the legend true. They boasted they would pass through all 7 gates. They were never seen again. Their campsite was discovered abandoned. Their car sat waiting at the forest's edge, but the woods kept the rest. Officials deny any of it is real. They claim no asylum ever existed here, no gates were built, no fire ever happened. And yet, land records from 1933 tell another story. 20 acres sealed by court order, the owner's name redacted, no explanation given. Those who've entered and survived speak of strange marks on the trees, blackened scars in patterns of 7 metal fragments twisting like vines, clearings that appear out of nowhere. And sometimes, when mapped from above, those clearings form a spiral, tightening inward toward a center no one dares to reach. The most terrifying are the sounds, screams that are not quite human, muffled and warped, as though carried through water, weeping that is not animal, is not human, but something in between. And when the mist swallows those voices, silence follows, heavier than death. Some believe passing through all 7 gates opens a doorway to another reality, one that never lets you return. Skeptics laugh, but even they admit the woods feel wrong. Trees lean inward, as though eavesdropping. The smell of burning wood hangs in the air when nothing is aflame. And always, just beyond sight, the mist. It does not rise like fog. It arrives. And when it does, the gates come with it. On Broadtop Mountain, the rails are long gone. Wooden ties rot beneath moss, steel tracks vanish into vines, and silence has settled where the engines once thundered. But some nights, when the air is still and the moon sits low, something impossible stirs on that mountain. A glow between the trees. A rail car that should no longer exist, gliding through the dark without sound. They call it the Phantom Rail Car of Broadtop Mountain. To understand the legend, you have to remember what this place once was. In the early 1900s, Broadtop Mountain was alive with industry. Coal poured from the mines, trains carried it across the region, and small towns grew fat with work and noise. The Broadtop Railroad was the artery of it all, clanking day and night, hauling black diamonds out of the earth. But when the crash came, when mines closed, jobs vanished, and families moved away. The rails went cold. By the 1950s, no trains rode these tracks. At least, no living ones. The sightings began quietly. Hikers spoke of a strange light in the trees, swaying as though carried by lanterns. Hunters swore they heard the metallic clank of iron under pressure, echoing through the valley where no rails remained. Some dismissed it as imagination. Others, who stayed longer, saw more. A rail car, antique in design, forged iron and aged wood, oil lamps glowing faintly inside. Sometimes it floated along the rusted tracks. Sometimes it hovered just above them. Always silent, always watching. Sometimes the car is empty. Other times, figures are visible through the glass men seated shoulder to shoulder. Expressionless, unmoving. Their faces pale, wrong, as though carved from wax. Witnesses describe the same detail again and again. The figures never blink. They never turn. They simply sit, as though waiting for a journey that will never end. The origin of the legend traces back to 1907, when a maintenance car carrying 6 miners derailed near Sandy Run. The brakes failed, the car plunged into a ravine, and all 6 men were killed. Instantly. Burned, crushed, thrown into the trees. Their bodies were buried, the wreckage cleared. But after that, the phantom began its rounds. First it was the sound, a high-pitched ringing, metal screaming against itself. Then the sightings, a glowing car where no car should be. By the 1970s, the tale had a name, the Phantom Railcar. Those who've seen it describe strange after effects, breath turning visible in July heat, flashlights stuttering before dying outright, watches skipping hours in seconds. One group of campers swore they watched the car pass by at 11:30 p.m. Their phones confirmed it. When they returned to their own car, just a mile away, it was past 3:00 a.m. Hours vanished, stolen by the mountain. The locals whisper something darker. They say the rail car is not just a ghost, but an omen. It does not appear to everyone, only to those marked in some way. Those who see it are being warned, or perhaps chosen. And there is one detail no one forgets. The car never stops. Hunters claim they have tried to follow it, sprinting through the woods as the glow wove between the trees. None who chased it ever caught it. A few never returned at all. Skeptics chalk it up to exhaustion, imagination, tricks of the moonlight. But how do you explain the sound? The rhythmic clack of iron wheels on tracks that have not existed for 70 years. The mountain keeps its secrets, and the railcar keeps moving. Always gliding forward, never resting. The question that chills everyone who has seen it is this: what happens if it ever does stop? What waits inside when the door finally opens? So far, no one has lived to tell. Some disasters leave ruins behind. Others leave echoes that never stop ringing. On May 31st, 1889, at exactly 3:10 p.m., the South Fork Dam collapsed under the weight of torrential rains, and 20 million tons of water came crashing down the valley. The flood hit Johnstown like a moving mountain, 40 feet high, 40 miles an hour, ripping apart houses, tossing trains like toys, wiping out entire families in seconds. More than 200 souls drowned that day, making it one of the deadliest tragedies in American history. And yet, not everything drowned. In the heart of Johnstown stood a Catholic church, its iron bells carried across the ocean by immigrants who believed they would outlast time. When the flood roared through, the church crumbled, its steeple torn down, its bells dragged beneath the rushing water. They were never recovered. Buried somewhere in the Conemaugh River, the bells vanished into mud and silence. But their voices did not. To this day, on still nights, when the air is windless and the river moves in quiet eddies, people hear them, deep, metallic, muffled, as if tolling from miles underwater. 3 chimes, a pause, then 2 more, always the same pattern. Fishermen say they have heard the bells just before their line snapped, as though something unseen tugged from the depths. Swimmers speak of sudden freezing water, a chill that grips the bones before silence presses in. Some boaters whisper not just of bells, but of chanting, low and wordless, echoing from below. Paranormal investigators have tried to capture proof. In 2014, a Pittsburgh team lowered hydrophones into the river and recorded hours of nothing but current and static until 3:12 a.m., when a clear bell tone rang out. Then another, then silence. The recording was played for historians, who swore the sound matched the lost bells of the Johnstown church exactly. Divers have scoured the riverbed. Magnetometers have searched for iron. No trace of the bells has ever been found. It is as though they were erased, yet condemned to keep tolling. Some believe the bells are trauma echoes, the flood replaying itself every year like a wound that refuses to close. Others claim they were cursed on the day of the disaster, bound to ring forever as a warning. A few whisper that the sound does not belong to this world at all, that something beneath the river is calling, and the bells are only its voice. One man walking his dog near the riverbank in 2007 described seeing light shimmering under the surface, like stained glass glowing from below. His dog froze, growling, then bolted in terror when the light vanished. The man never returned to that path again. The townspeople of Johnstown rarely speak of the bells. They honor the flood, they mourn the dead, but when asked about the sounds that still rise from the Conemaugh, their lips press shut. Because if you admit they are real, you might start listening for them. And some believe if you ever hear all 5 chimes clearly, something hears you back. 6 places, 6 stories, 6 wounds carved into the land of Pennsylvania, a town erased, yet still waiting, a tunnel where silence is hungrier than screams, a tavern that remembers the crimes buried beneath its floors, a forest where gates open into mist that does not forgive, a train that rides the night but never stops, bells that toll for the drowned long after their voices faded. Some say these are only stories, but when the air goes still, when the mist creeps low, when your reflection lingers too long in the glass, you may wonder what else is still hiding in Pennsylvania's shadows. And more importantly, if you go looking for the truth, will it ever let you leave? If you think Pennsylvania is unsettling, this is just the beginning. Our playlist dives into the darkest legends from every corner of America. Real history, real places, stories that still breathe. Click now, explore the secrets buried in your own backyard. And remember, lock your doors, put on your headphones, and do not look back. Because once you open these doors, you will never see the world the same way again.